Urban explorers of Reddit, what was your I bet a GTFO story? In a building I found the basement. Then the sub-basement. It was dark. Heard a sound. Then an animal running sound. And dogs barking. I fucking booked it back up the stairs and closed the fire door and GTFO. Speaking to some Urbex mentors, they explained if you hear dogs or see them, to not go in the area as it's probably used for a drug lab. I was taking a look at some of those massive smokestacks in an abandoned factory and I heard a radio squelch. That's time to go, right there. Spooky cement tunnel that seems to lead underground. Very dark and echoes go on for ages. We had no clue what it was, didn't seem to be any kind of drainage tunnel because it was square/bone dry and out in an open field. There are definitely some old bomb shelters and missile silos on our area that are out of commission, so we decided to take a look. Only about 20 yards in and the light from outside starts really fading behind us. Someone takes out a flashlight and we start seeing bare human footprints on the ground leading deeper into the dark. None leaving. We skedaddled. I was exploring the abandoned hospital at night when I see a light shining down the corridor just on my left. When I saw that I started to run back when I hear the loudest, most distorted laughter ever. Then I heard a man screaming, then the sound of something breaking. I learned a few days later that it was my friend who knew I was going to be there alone and he wanted to scare me. The screaming man was actually coming from the video on the SCP Bonebreaker. Came upon an active shooting gallery in a tunnel one time, I noped TF out of there in a hurry. Sort of urban exploring, I guess. When I was at Chicago they were renovating some of the Green Line stations and a friend and I would jump the turnstiles at the station across from our building at night to get high and watch the trains. Day 2 of the station being closed and one of the conductors saw us and actually stopped, so we got on with only one other person in the car, thinking it'd be fun to just ride it until it came back. It's pretty late, and after a few minutes we realized the homeless looking guy sitting at the other end of the car isn't actually masturbating, he's cleaning a gun. Got off only to realize it was an Ashland/63RD bound train and had no idea where TF we were. To this day neither of us remember how we made it home. Only now writing this do I realize we had no way of getting back since they wouldn't have stopped at our station again. I spent a lot of years super into urban exploration hoping something would make me nope out. It happened a lot and it was always the same thing. The cops. Oh, I've had my share of things that made me nope out. Here's just a few. 1. Found a gas leak in an abandoned house that had been building up for years a couple weeks ago. I GTFO, but not before finishing taking the photos I wanted with extreme caution. That one I reported to the cops, as it's classified as the kind of hazard in the urbex community that supersedes discretion. 2. Ran into the security guard doing an unexpected interior patrol. He definitely knew we were there, so we had to book it for the tree line before he could get the cops out there to search. 3. Some homeless dude chucking cans and bottles out the 5th-story window of an old factory my friend and I were poking around to scare us off. We took a hint and left. 4. Tripped a motion detecting camera in the basement of an abandoned building and had to bail. I know for a fact they got a full face photo of me staring directly into the camera with shock, but I never heard anything more about it. Less urban but sharing anyway. I was camping in BC with my GF at the time and her dog. Had a couple of rough-looking people who were the only other people in the area we were camping, but it was late so we set up and thought nothing of it. Guy wanders over while we're in our tent, can hear him outside and dog is barking at this point. I get out and ask what he's doing and he says he just wanted to pet the dog. This is at like midnight, told him we were settling in etc. Guy wanders off without replying at all to what it said. Woke up the next morning to what looked to me like a single 9mm bullet sitting upright on our site's picnic table, and a happy face made with sticks and rocks on the bench part of the table below it. Maybe it was just a shitty joke, but we sure as fuck didn't stay around to find out. I did lots in the UK a few years back. Denby Asylum in general just made me nope the fuck out. That place was scary. Came across a large structure with high windows. It was essentially one rather large room, 2 external doors, cathedral height ceiling and windows high on the walls. Interior was painted a rather drab yellowish green, and paint was peeling everywhere. Floor was a sort of cement, cracked here and there. I think there may have been a drain somewhere on the floor. Lots of dirt and leaves. Then all of a sudden, the loudest shrillest scream emanated from right smack middle of the room. We both covered our ears by reflex. It lasted like 2 seconds. We had been on opposite sides of the room examining the walls and chipping paint. Freaked out and exited, each at the door nearest to where we had been. Circled around and met on one side. We each heard the scream come from the middle of the empty room, but nobody else was there. Also nobody else outside anywhere we could see, and certainly nowhere near enough for it to have seemed to be from inside. Never experienced anything else like that. I was exploring when I noticed some dude trailing me. I was saved by a bus driver, who noticed me and opened the door as he passed by me. Oh, I have a decent story. I was with several of my friends, and my girlfriend. We knew of this old abandoned nursery out in the country not too far from our college. It was on a weekend, and around midnight or so. I don't remember specifics. We pull up, and we park the car. I go in first, followed by my good friend, and my GF. To be honest, nothing really occurred until the end, when we found this room at the end of this really short hallway. It had paintings of clowns, and 2 beds in it, that were meant for babies. My girlfriend claims to have heard a chuckle come from the room as we were leaving. We all turned because she spoke. My other friend screams as the door slams. Here's the thing. I turned right before she screamed, and I witnessed the door close, before she touched it. I know what I fucking saw. She screamed, as the door slammed. Creepiest shit I had seen in person, in a very long time. I was walking back home and took a short break to lean on a corner of a grocery store. Kind of a sketchy area of Queens, NY, but I felt safe walking with a few friends. The parking lot entrance was along the edge we were leaning on. All of a sudden, a totally blacked out fancy sedan pulls into the entrance, but stops right in front of us. At the same moment, a tall man in a suit came walking from around the corner, basically behind us, and gives us all a terrifying look, like we need to leave. As the man opens the back door to get in, the passenger side window opens and we see the face of 2 oldish men staring at us with a chilling look. Without missing a beat or even looking at each other, we quickly stood straight and rushed away. We fast walked away and said nothing until we got to the next block. We have no idea what we saw, but I don't think we were supposed to. The coldness felt from the stares we got were unlike anything I've experienced. I was in Athens, Greece. It was my first time traveling alone in a foreign country. I didn't know that people basically desert the streets midday. I walked into a shop just off the Plaza. I didn't realize the store was empty and the owner locked the door behind me. I looked around for a bit then tried to leave, but he blocked the way. I am damn lucky he didn't physically attack me. He finally opened the door. Lesson learned. I was exploring an old office house of a slaughterhouse. While I was in there, I heard voices and someone have a dog that was barking and running around. I jumped out of the window and ran away because the building was all abandoned. There was an abandoned house down the road from my high school that was still filled with stuff. Some friends and I would hang out in there from time to time. There was a point where the house got boarded up and we didn't go into it for a while. Jump to a few months later, and one of my friends told me he found a way inside. After a couple more weeks I went to the house with one friend to check it out again and relive some memories. When we got there, it was clear something bad had taken place. The stuff in the house was thrown all over the place. Any kind of dish from the kitchen was smashed on the floor. When we looked at the stairs to the second floor we both got the worst feeling, like we would find something terrible if we went up there, so we got the hell out of there. After a couple more months, the house was demolished. In Al Assad Air Base, Iraq, my unit inherited this massive hangar thing that was backed up to a few old bunkers. They were these huge pyramids protruding from the sand. I didn't have much going on one night, so I was skulking around. I found an air vent on top. I kicked out the screen and the duct led to a ladder that went way down. I Mission Impossibled some chem lights and climbed down. It was full of spent brass and pieces of weapons. I found a door that had all the trappings of an officer's office. In the desk I found a diary, turned out to be the minutes of several years of party meetings, and a flag. Proud of my new loot, I found another small closet. I opened the door and it was floor-to-ceiling UXO. Everything from grenades to those packages that hold C4 mortar rounds. Tons of it, and it was all very obviously old as fuck. I shot up that ladder like I was being shot at, chem lights in hand. I put the vent back on and cartoon casual whistle walked the fuck home. Oh man, I was in an awesome old abandoned hospital with a couple of buddies at night. I love Silent Hill, and that was the exact kind of feeling I had walking around in that place. Haunting beauty and incredibly intense. We were up in the second floor and I went ahead a bit, and was just scanning each individual room as I passed them, and then I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. As I peeked into one of the rooms, a pair of legs were laying on the ground. I immediately thought dead body or hobo, and I finally knew what hair standing on the back of my neck meant. I was about to GTFO, but I was there so I had to find out, so I slowly continued to peek further into the room and then I saw it. A pair of fucking wader boots. I laughed as the epic tension was released all in an instant. I walked back to my buddies and told them to go check out that room, not telling them what was in there. Great prank set up by somebody. I did a video on this story if you're interested in seeing some footage of the hospital. Awesome place. Sadly it was torn down. Went exploring in an old textile mill in rural Alabama. It was easy enough to hide your car for parking, and you could even pull your car onto the site if you had four-wheel drive. We went often and one time parked right in the middle of the mill's back lot and decided to climb the ladders to the roof. Once we got to the roof the sun started setting, so we got our headlamps ready, watched the sunset, then decided to head back down from the roof. As we're walking to the ladder my car alarm down below starts going off, and immediately from the rooftop across from us someone flashed a flashlight at us, but they never said a thing. I was way too nervous about my car being stolen to really care about the other person, but they didn't chase us, yell, nothing, they just kept their light on us so that we could never see them and followed us with their light till we got into the car and left. I never went back after that. It's torn down now. When I was a teenager some friends and I would occasionally party in the disused biology department of the local university. Would get in through a hole one of us cut in this barbed wire fence surrounding the building. Maybe the fourth or fifth time hanging out there a few of us are exploring and find a lab that's still got like beakers and vials in it, and there's this big ass walk-in freezer type door in the back with plastic tape over it. Sort of like crime scene tape. Being the young imbeciles we were, we tore the tape off and opened the door. It was definitely some kind of storage area, with shelves full of jars of weird liquids and powders, and the ground was covered in broken glass from a jar that had fallen and shattered, releasing this red powdery substance that was coating everything. We realized it probably was hazardous to our health, went back to the main group and we all left and never went back. I still have no idea what the stuff was, it could have been harmless. But I'm also glad we were sober enough not to try tasting it or something stupid like that. No really scary ones other than random bums yelling and stuff. But there were a couple of good encounters. Messing around in the outskirts of a train yard taking pics of old train cars and stuff. Ran into I guess a mechanic or maintenance worker or something who ended up being super cool and started up and pulled a locomotive out of the shed for us. In an old abandoned mining site somewhere I came around the side of a big machine thing and ran into a homeless dude living in a tent. He also turned out to be cool. We gave him some of our food and sat around for a while talking. Exploring the grounds of a big old New England mental institution's campus at night. It's a full moon but pitch black inside, because the windows are so dirty. Being dumb kids before smartphones, we didn't come prepared with a lot of light and were mostly navigating by 2 flashlights between our group and the moonlight when outside. We're in the main building and most of it is what you'd expect, 60-70s decor, peeling paint, a couple weird looking chairs and 2 legit rubber rooms. A movie had shot there at some point, so some of the walls are burnt from a stunt or something, I guess. There's 2 stairwells in the building on either end and we have to keep alternating between them because there's stuff in the way. We keep going through the floors until we reach the roof. The roof doors are these big heavy metal solid doors. The far stairwell door won't budge at all, so we go back down and try the other stairwell. This one we can see is kind of wedged open and the top corner of the door is bent back, letting light in. We squeeze out onto the roof and walk around for a bit. I happened to be holding the flashlight and turned it back to the door. The door wasn't just bent, it was straight up peeled back to open it like a tuna can. There were 3 huge scars that I can only describe as claw marks, each one as long as an adult's forearm. I lost my shit and insisted it was time to go. We made an expeditious retreat out of the building, but it was still a good 2 to 3 minute walk back to our cars, which was the most terrifying part of the night. Haha. No idea what could have made those marks. Just really glad we didn't decide to go into some of the other buildings that were totally sealed up. You had to enter those through some underground tunnels, steam tunnels I think, that connected the buildings, and the entrance was super sketch. TL, Dr. Scary Mental Institute has a big metal door ripped open with huge claw marks. Edit, it's the Belchertown State School for those asking. Man, as I read all these stories I feel my pulse going up and my palms getting sweaty. I was 16 or 17, so like 2006-ish, out in a park out in a western suburb of Chicago with some friends. It's a medium-sized forest preserve with a big industrial lot leading to the parking lot, then a prairie area, then a big old forest with paths. We're walking around the forest for a few hours in the early afternoon and see some random pentagrams around and stuff. Honestly nothing super out of the ordinary, but they seem concentrated by this field that's probably like 2,000 square feet of 4 feet tall grass. For whatever reason I thought it would be fun to walk into the middle of the grass field. Right in the dead center, there is like a 8 feet long, 3 feet wide rectangle of freshly dug ground. Like perfect for a body. Because of how tall the grass was, it was almost totally covered, but when I moved the grass back it was like a burial mound. I told my friend we had to leave and so we beeline back to the parking lot. My friend didn't smoke in his car so we had a cig next to the car. Cop pulls up, and we're underage so we flick our cigarettes and start to get in the car. Cop turns on his lights and stops us. Once he sees we're kids, he says something like better get out of here, it's not a good place to be after dark. I finally convinced a group of about 5 or so of my friends to follow me into this old house that was in an odd sort of industrial area, like on one of those service roads next to a highway. The only way in was to go through the basement and through a hole in the wall at the top of the stairs. After exploring for a while I thought I'd do a scout mission for fun that involved me just walking around the house to check for cops. Well, what do you know, there were cop cars just pulling into the street with sirens on that were pulling into the restaurant next door. Someone probably reported us. The exit was on the other side of the house from the cops. I quickly called up to the others to climb back out and we somehow managed. I don't generally believe in intuition, but I do find it odd that I had the urge to do a sweep right when the cops showed up. In an old mill, saw a hole in the floor and went back. Found out later that the floor was actually a glass roof and the hole was from someone walking on it. Was exploring an abandoned TB hospital. Heard a sound that sounded a lot like a homeless person snoring. It took a while for my friends and I to work up the courage to go in the room where we heard it, but we were rewarded with the sight of a vulture's nest. I was inside an abandoned brewery, looking at the old equipment. I climbed a lot of stairs and found a door with scribbles of graffiti on it, among them the sentence "Don't look down." We were about 4 stories off the ground at this point, but my curiosity was killing me. I opened the door. Nothing. No stairs or balcony or fence. The door was on the wall of the building and opened into thin air, and you absolutely would have been killed painfully, had you fallen out. Church Road. The abandoned house with religious pamphlets strewn about. We turn around and an old man is standing there behind us all of a sudden. Not shouting at us to leave, just staring off through us. Down. Needless to say, we GTFO of there ASAP. Decided to solo mission an abandoned church. Dropped down through a window into the basement. After wandering through some hallways, I found a large room with the stairs to the main level at the other end. Started crossing the room when I heard footsteps above me. It sounded like somebody walking with crutches or a peg leg making a weird thunk thunk, thunk thunk. The steps seemed to be going in a circle. I paused for a minute. I'd had run-ins with homeless people before that were generally amiable. I'd make small talk for a minute, give them a smoke and some change, and everything would be copacetic. I wasn't normally scared to run into them. This time I had a weird bad feeling. After hesitating, I took a couple more steps toward the stairs. I was so focused on the noise above me that I accidentally kicked an empty spray paint can which clattered away along the floor. The footsteps above me stopped for a moment. Then whatever it was began running, still making that thunk thunk, towards the stairs I was about to start climbing. I was suddenly more terrified than I have ever been in my life. I sprinted full tilt back toward the window I'd come through as whatever it was began running down the stairs and somehow managed to quickly claw my way up and out. I didn't look back until I was safely out of the building, at which point I could neither hear nor see anything. I waited outside for a few minutes, but apparently whoever it was had decided scaring me off was good enough and had retreated back into the building. Slightly spooky epilogue. About 3 weeks later I went back with a couple friends. We made our way into the building and up the stairs without incident. Inside the church we found obvious evidence of multiple homeless persons living there. There were mattresses set up in corners, some small fires had been lit, etc. Most of it was fairly normal. However, on the windowsills we found multiple birds and small mammals, all of which had been beheaded and their bodies carefully lined up. After perusing and photographing the main sanctuary, I and one friend made our way up to the 3rd floor, which had classrooms and offices. Coming up the stairs I could see the door to a room off the landing at the very top. As I got to the last few stairs the door abruptly slammed shut. The room had been dark and didn't appear to have any windows, and I couldn't feel much of breeze or see any open windows looking down the hallway from the top of the stairs to pull the door shut. My friend tried to open the door and said that it felt like there was something on the other side pushing it shut. We elected not to explore the 3rd floor, and after going downstairs and consulting with our other friend it was decided we should leave. About 3 years later I revisited that church, and when I came to the top of the stairs I found the door to that room wide open. Shining my flashlight in I confirmed that the room had no windows. That church is fairly well known in the local exploring community, and while several people have said they got a bad feeling or felt creeped out there, nobody else has had any kinds of encounters. I assume the first incident was a homeless resident trying to scare me off, the dead animals were the work of an unmedicated schizophrenic, and the slamming door was a homeless person not wanting his nap/high disturbed by some dumb kids. That said, the whole experience was hair-raising, and I still bring it up as an anecdote for new explorers on why you should never explore alone. Me and my friend were going to explore a large farmland that was private property. We were about to enter a large paddock until I saw a large sign saying something along the lines of "Beware bull." My friend wanted to do it, but I backed out and convinced him to do the same. Glad I did, cause after seeing what a bull can do we would be lucky to escape one. I was an avid urban explorer for most of my teenage and young adult life. Construction cranes, abandoned buildings, buildings in operation, you name it. My goal was always to get where I shouldn't be. The views were unreal. My buddies and I had been scouting an abandoned factory on the side of the highway for a few weeks. Everything seemed normal the day of. We pulled up and stashed our bikes, making sure we had an easy access point in case the cops showed up. Everything was going great for all of 2 minutes before we turn a corner and find ourselves staring at a drug deal that I can only compare to the opening scene in The Dark Knight. Dogs, assault weapons, and a lot of angry men. We ran fast. Just as we were picking up our bikes, one guy ran after us and fired a shot. We were lucky to get away with our lives, and I was pretty spooked for a while after that. TLDR, we were exploring an abandoned factory and walked into an armed drug deal. I've answered one of these before, but I'm more than happy to again. There's a place in Liverpool, UK called Mossley Manor. Old nursing home that's absolutely stunning. Inside it's being left to rot, but there's lots left behind, pictures, files on residents. Place was shut down over cruelty to the residents. In fact, one of the files I read discussed how police were called over a resident, as paramedics arrived to them having passed, yet staff said they died in the ambulance. Anyway, I know this place inside and out. It's a beautiful building with a horrible history. It's fantastic for photos and digging into its past. I would go once a week and bring friends. Teach them how to respect the history. One day, I had a feeling. I'm not a huge paranormal believer, but I had that feeling. Something was watching me. What? I don't know. But I felt it had always been there. Like it allowed me to feel confident before, so it could get me now. What would it do to me? Fuck knows. But I've never been back. I have a friend who is into his spooky memes. He was giving me some shite about negative energy manifesting into a poltergeist. He could be right. I would rather not know. Anyone interested in the building? It's easy to get into. Make sure you let someone know where you are. Make sure you wear the right clobber, steel toe boots and that, and be safe. Boy oh boy do I have a story. Went urban exploring in an abandoned college campus. Was pretty cool, due to be demolished, and there was some really nice graffiti. At the time I kept sending video messages to a friend of me roaming around looking at everything. The way the area was set up was pretty much a singular building in this giant lot with nothing on it, right in the middle, with it being open area about 100 meters either way. The building was 3 stories and on the ground floor had an open area where there appeared to be an abandoned car. So I was messing around looking at this graffiti and the random junk everywhere and recording videos for my friend when I finally went to record the graffiti right next to the car. I started filming a video of the graffiti when, what do you know? The car turns on. I immediately throw my hands up and point towards the gate to gesture sorry, didn't realize someone was here. I'll be on my way. When the guy starts blaring on the horn and starts revving the engine, at this point I'm startled and decide to gun it down the driveway back to the gate, and what do you know, he starts speeding after me in the car whilst still blaring on the horn. Due to being startled and running, I apparently accidentally hit send to the video I took on my phone to my friend, whilst all captioning it 1111 as I was running away. I have the video saved if anyone's curious. At this point I was right in the headlights with him right behind, so I turned off the driveway and ran over a pile of rocks, falling down on my way down the other side of them. Scratched my knee really badly, glasses went flying off and got scratched up too. I get the glasses and sprint, more like hobble quickly, to the fence where there's some bush covering. The guy pulls up nearby and winds down the window, and you could smell the car from how far I was. It was putrid, and the guy for sure looked like he was living out of the car. I have insane adrenaline going and sort of slink further away through the bushes but can't get over the fence. I figured I could wait the guy out. I was there for around 20 minutes whilst he sat there with his car idling. By this point my friend was practically having a panic attack, thinking I just got murdered, and my adrenaline was wearing off and the pain from my leg was setting in, so I couldn't climb the fence and get away quickly without him noticing. My friend was messaging me like crazy asking if I was okay, and she ended up driving to the place to rescue me. She pulled up a bit up the street and the guy drove up towards there, which gave me the chance to climb the fence. She rushed down to where I had said I was, picked me up, and we drove off. Never have I been so scared in my life, and have never appreciated someone more. Not urban. But I was driving down a country road once north of Puerto Vallarta and looked down the road to the left. There was a lightly wooded area with maybe 100 people having a family-type gathering. Spread around the trees and on the road were many hard-looking guys in black uniforms and automatic-looking rifles. We just kept going. The cartels need downtime too, I guess. My friend, my brother and I were exploring the woods and we came across this little area of sand and it was just flat, not trees, and all there was a teddy bear with one eye and a knife right next to it. So we looked at each and said, shit, time to run home. Was exploring the basement of this really cool old Victorian mansion, came across a kind of alarmingly large den of snakes. I doubt they were anything dangerous, but they started looking at me and slithering around, so I politely apologized for invading their home and noped the fuck out of there. Little bit late here, but I once went exploring with my brother on an old abandoned naval base at midnight. We snuck into the officers' quarters and were just exploring when we heard a weird noise. We're both into photography, so I decided to take a flash photo and see if I caught anything weird in the light. The camera went off and we both saw a massive, 6-foot-long bee's nest on the side of one of the walls. I think our presence has just disturbed them, because hundreds of them were already crawling in the outside of the nest. It was the single most scariest thing I've ever seen, and it was gone in a second because of the camera flash. We noped the fuck out of there right as a cop was pulling up to see what we were up to, lol. Back in 2005 or so, I was a junior in high school with a tight-knit group of friends. On the weekends, we had taken a shining to exploring these old farmhouses you occasionally see. Well, on Saturday night, about midnight, we came across an old white farmhouse about a quarter mile off the road. We decided it looked ripe for an exploratory mission. We parked the car, a red 1977 Chevelle, and the four of us hopped out. We crossed a dirt road in the darkness and made our way to the house, flashlights in hand. We entered, and it was standard abandoned fare, dusty, musty, half-rotted furniture. We went into the kitchen, and the dining table was still set, forks, plates, the works, all covered with a layer of dust. We kept poking around and one pal, let's call him Jimmy, calls us to a hallway. He had found the attic, and one of them a little strings that pulls down a fold-out ladder. After maybe 30 seconds of goading each other, Jimmy decided to pull the string. He did. Nothing happened, except the ladder came down. He started up it, and just as he started to peek around with his flashlight, we heard the loudest goddamn thump come from up in the attic. I think we all screamed. We ran out, got in that fucking Chevelle and got the hell out of there. Jimmy didn't really want to talk about it. I don't explore places like that anymore. My urban exploring isn't all that urban, as I live in Montana and explore mostly abandoned homesteads. There is almost a guarantee that there will be one if not two dead animals and a car that looks like it would still run if not for rust and dirt. I have run into one guy that came flying up in a pickup truck with a crowbar. Another time I came in to find a not-so-dead and rather pissed-off raccoon. I was in a place that used to be a grocery store with two of my cousins and a few of their friends. And it was the largest grocery store I had ever seen. It was probably half the size of a Walmart. The whole time we had the feeling of being watched, and at the same time we turned a corner and saw something that looked exactly like Trevor Henderson's cartoon cat. We didn't even see it for a split second before bolting and not stopping until our lungs felt like they were on fire a mile away from that store. That's the event that turned me from kind of religious to very religious. Florida has some weird crap, but this takes the cake for me. There was this massive salt storage facility that had a mountain of salt that a private company owned on a rather derelict property next to the city bay. I'm guessing the company sold salt to the city and other municipalities for road maintenance during the winter. My friends and I, all about 12 at the time, as kids do at that age, thought it would be cool to sneak in and climb to the top of this major salt mountain. This salt mountain was about 200 high, it was massive. We get to the top and celebrated, rewarded with the most gorgeous view of the city skyline and its buildings lit up across the bay as the afternoon had turned to dusk. As we're getting ready to come down off the mountain, there were about 5 guard dogs, I believed Dobermans, who were at the bottom of the salt mound staring up at us with a piercing glare. They couldn't get up the mountain because they couldn't get traction on the salt, and it probably hurt their paws. We all started freaking out, my friend's little brother began crying, we began yelling for help but nobody was around. It was late on a cold Sunday afternoon in November. The sky's hue darkened as dusk turned to dark. We were probably up there for 2 hours trying to figure out what to do. We finally got silent, laid flat, and acted like we disappeared. The dogs must have gotten bored or distracted and began wandering away. We kept looking, and when they didn't come back for 20 minutes, we traversed off of the salt mound as fast as we could and made a mad dash for the fence in which we entered, and luckily all got out safely. Our parents were all pissed, ready to call the cops because none of us came home at dark. It was one of the most scariest moments of my childhood. Oh boy, I got a few. The best one was when I was taking my normie friends through this school I knew, which was considered a super easy spot. Like, kids go there and fuck around, it's so open and well known. So I took my friends there who don't explore, and I had just showed them the gym, when I walked down the hallway and looked at the stairway, where I spotted a silhouette standing, and it's this fucking guy, right? He's got black shoes, black pants, no shirt, and a long, dark cowl that covers his face. Most importantly, however, he was holding a katana, which he unsheathed once the light was on him. To my credit, I played it cool. I was just like, just gonna get out of here then. Then I pushed my normie friends around the corner, who began running, so I started running, and kept running until we were out of the building, at which point, I stopped and turned around, because there is no way he's chasing us, right? No, he was chasing us. So I break into this dead sprint and run probably faster than I ever have in my fucking life, pass my friends onto the way to my car, then start trying the fancy-ass electronic key for my stupid fucking hybrids which, in perfect horror movie fashion, decides not to work. My friends are banging on the roof like, come on, open the fucking door please. And I yell back at them, it's not fucking working. Let's run to the fire station across the street. My thought process was that surely the firemen would help us, right? Isn't that what first responders do? Either way, we started jogging that way, and the katana guy is slowly walking towards my car now, and I stop before we get to the fire station, and wave down this truck that's watching us on the corner. The guy rolls down his window, and I'm like, did you fucking see that? He's this middle-aged tweaker-looking dude, and he looks in his rear-view mirror at this feral swordsman who is now standing next to my car, and is like, you talking about Count Fagula back there? Yeah, he just chased us out of the school with a fucking sword. Oh, well that's just Brandon. He's just a kid, he's like, 15 or 16? He don't mean no harm. Well he fucking got me going. Yeah, hell do that. You know that school is haunted, right? I live down the hill from it. Okay, thanks. As this exchange takes places, the katana guy walks back into the school, so I go and try the key on my car and finally get it open, then grab my friends, who tell me that the firemen were largely unconcerned by our mortal danger, simply saying, yeah, Terry's some crazy people out there, then shutting the door in their faces. It was a fun night. Better than the first time I ran into a katana guy, in fact. I was exploring an old storm water filtration plant once. The lower levels of the main buildings were all flooded, which was super creepy, and it was pretty overgrown. This was my second time there and I wanted to see more than I had last time. A friend of mine and I had the bright idea to climb into one of the pipes that had an open manhole cover, really stupid for a whole bunch of reasons. We figured we knew/had a pretty good guess where it would come out, as there was another manhole on the other side of the compound in line with where the pipe was heading. When we got all the way there though, it turned out to be welded shut. The worst bit was when we turned to go back, we realized we'd been slowly going downhill. The pipe was fairly slimy and it seemed for a minute like we wouldn't be able to go back the way we'd come. I've never quite felt that level of claustrophobia before or since. I've been given permission to share this story. Last week one of my good friends made the pilgrimage across a few states on his motorcycle, to go visit extended family. Decided to camp along the way, in an effort to get out into nature, and catch some scenic sunsets. He texted me an SOS after he made it to his family's house, and told me this over FaceTime. In parts of West Texas, there are only gas stations every 90 miles or so. Getting low on gas before the last sunset, he decided to camp near two abandoned structures. The next morning, with DSLR in hand, he decides to go exploring. As he's filming, he walks into the second structure. He panics. A person is sitting in a chair with her head rested on the table, an arm dangling to the side, and a trash bag over her head. He runs to the road and tries to get a hold of Border Patrol. As he was 40 miles from the border, he later found out. After walking some miles, he got the attention of a BP agent. After all is said and done, the BP agents inform him that her death had been reported by the man who helped her group get across the United States border. They also tell him that 13 inches of snow a couple nights prior was believed to be the cause of death. After being detained for a few hours, he was let go in part because the evidence on his camera put him in a different state when it happened. He said the worst part about it was he felt in some way she was relatable. Even worse, she was his age, 20 years old, and made it all the way from Guatemala, only to die 40 miles after crossing the US border. Heartbreaking. He promised me he won't camp next time, and get a motel or Airbnb. Heard on the police scanner that some guys were in an abandoned house. That thing has saved us multiple times. I spent a few years getting into urbex, and there was this really popular abandoned mill in my city. One Saturday I took a whole bunch of friends out there as their tour guide. It was a great time, but there were a ton of people there that day. More than I had ever seen before. After a few hours of checking out various parts of the mill, we suddenly hear a commotion going on below us. I look out the window and there are about 4 cop cars, a paddy wagon and a golf cart. Kids are scattering every direction and the cops are chasing them on their golf cart and throwing them into the wagon. I tell all my friends to run and we split up. Me and a buddy of mine stick together and book it to the ground floor and climb out a window out towards the back of the building. There is this big river and then some woods, and we can hear lots of yelling, so we decide to wade across the river and run through the woods. We wade across this river in near chest deep water and then through a whole bunch of mud, and we are just booking it through these woods because our moms will kill us if we get arrested. Eventually we feel like we've put enough distance between us and the cops to catch our breath, but I don't think I've ever ran that hard in my life. We're both covered in mud, water, and scratches, but at least we didn't get caught. We trek back to our cars that are parked near the mill and find all of our friends hanging out. Thankful that none of them got caught, we asked them how they got out and they said they just walked out the front door. Apparently the cops filled up the wagon and just left to get more cops. I felt pretty stupid. I have another story about this mill if anyone is interested. It's way dumber but funny all the same. I don't fuck with deserted buildings anymore after this friend of mine got hospitalized after experiencing a severe panic attack and later on got super depressed. He didn't tell anybody of what he saw. Never had a true run-in. Your mind definitely plays tricks on you, especially when you are alone in an abandoned building you are not supposed to be in. There was a brick factory that was recently marked for demo in my area, and though it would be easy pickings, snuck in, no fencing, didn't need to break anything to get in. Took some photos of the damaged equipment, some graffiti tags on the walls, all good fun. Was about 30 minutes in before I started hearing footsteps pitter-patter around. The building echoed like crazy, so any step you took potentially made such noticeable sounds, which would be followed by the steps coming from the unknown figure zeroing, and you could hear them get closer. I eventually rolled out of a window after walking myself inside an office room for a full 5 minutes of hushed breathing. Was confident it was a homeless man trying to kill me. It was a cop, saw the car on the way out. Luckily didn't get grabbed. It's never a monster, it's always cops. Not my dealer, but a guy I knew from school, was 17 to 18 and moved out of his parents' house with drug money alone and started selling everything from weed to heroin. One day I was walking to the dollar store to get some snacks and I had to pass by this dude's house. As I'm passing, I look to see all his car and house windows busted out with a sledgehammer through his Mustang's windshield. Being a bit too curious, I decided to look in a window. From a safe distance, this guy is pinned against a wall with a gun on his forehead and 4 dudes around him screaming at him. I booked it because I didn't want to be a wrong place, wrong time kid, you know. What ended up happening, but by the time I came back the house was empty and the cars were gone. Never saw the kid again either at school or around the neighborhood, but I also didn't see any news or anyone talking about him dying, so The house went up for rent again after they replaced all the windows and a new drug dealer moved in. Abandoned insane asylum. Saw what looked like a shadow kneeling down praying. It was darker than the dark background. When I shined my light, it disappeared as the light went on it. I hurried up out of the basement, lol. Most of the time it's cops or security, but there was one time it was something else. My friend and I were exploring the local abandoned insane asylum. We were in the underground tunnels that stretched as far as our flashlights could shine. The echoing is unreal down there, so we would stop every 30 feet or so to let the echoes die down, so we knew we were alone. The one time we stopped, the echoes died down and then we heard what sounded like an elevator coming to the ground floor. There were no elevators in the building and no power anyway. We looked at each other and bailed. No idea what it was to this day. Some homeless dude with an ex chased me while me and my friend were walking around under a bridge in a low-end part of town. Was exploring an abandoned train station. We were on our way out when I spotted a shopping cart with something in a huge black garbage bag. I remember saying, "Hang on. What the hell is that?" Stepped up and placed my hand on the bag, only to feel what felt like a human's head through the bag. I don't know what it was for sure because I didn't want the psychological damage from opening it up and seeing what was inside, but I never forgot it. We were exploring an abandoned paper mill on the Staten Island, NJ border. Ended up climbing the train bridge tower next to it via the service ladder. Had to bounce when security got wise and we were still near the top of the bridge. An old friend and I entered a house under construction when we were teenagers, and we planned to hide in it to smoke weed. It had no permanent doors yet, only huge plywood that we could easily move, so we entered. We lived in a really small city and the house was far from the road, so we were not scared of being caught. The house had rudimental stairs that went up the second floor, and my friend decided to explore up there. The stairs felt really dangerous and I realized that if we badly hurt ourselves, it would be really hard to explain. I called out. My friend called me a pussy, but I don't regret it. I followed my instinct. Sorry for my bad English, it is not my first language. Got invited to go explore an abandoned mountainside hotel in Japan. I decided not to go, considering it was on an active volcano. Come to think of it, I never did see those guys again. Not terribly urban, back when I lived in the rural South, but my friend and I went to an abandoned trailer because she wanted to show me all the old Playboys that were left lying around in it. There were pentagrams painted on the front door and on one wall of the bedroom that was through the kitchen, but that wasn't too spooky. My brother was one of those edgy teenagers and I had seen more than enough crookedly spray-painted pentagrams to know it was just idiots goofing off. Nah. The scary part was the half-dead cat hung by its back legs from the ceiling fan in the back room down the hall. We went to take it down so we could call the cops and then hopefully get to bury it at her house and give it some peace. And then it woke up and started squalling. It scratched me on my arms and her on the face and tried to get away, but it was so weak all it could do was stagger. We eventually got it wrapped in my shirt and walked home to explain to her mom where we were and how it happened. That crotchety old cat lived like another 6 years with no teeth, dislocated back legs, fixed by the vet of course, but the cat still limped forever, and horrible cataracts. Old abandoned army barracks at the end of my rural dead-end street. It was up on posts about 10 tall with one stairway with no rail leading to an open doorway. I think they had vehicles park underneath. I'm alone and start up the steps. About step number 4 to 5, a gigantic fucking owl comes swooping out of the doorway, right at me. I dove off the steps into the tall weeds, checked the sky, then moped the fuck out of there, never to return. Nothing too serious. I was walking around Toyohashi where I lived in Aichi Prefecture, Japan. I took a turn down a street during a busy evening in the central business district in the direction home when I realized it was what I liked to call a red light street. I was walking behind a well-dressed couple and would have continued with that tactic when I noticed the security/pimps looking at me funny. It made me uncomfortable, so I looked for an escape. Just as the couple turned right, I turned left through a car park to a parallel street to get out of there. Street view. During the day it doesn't look like much, but they are clearly strip joints and there is an actual sex worker hanging out on the corners of these streets every night. Was exploring an abandoned Air Force base near where I live that has patrols of guards, but by far the scariest thing that's ever happened to me there was when I was walking on top of one of the buildings and the bird started rustling right underneath me inside the building. My heart genuinely skipped a few beats until I figured out what it was. I was on leave from the psych ward having a cigarette and decided to explore the abandoned nurses' quarters/old psych hospital next door. Went in through a broken window and moseyed around for a bit, pilfered some curtains that were very funky, but couldn't figure out how to get back out. Heard the most insanely loud crash down the hall from me and panic ran around the place until I found the flaming window and hauled ass out of there. Lost the fucking curtains. We were at makeout point with a few friends. There's an old trail and the place is also nicknamed Skinwalker Road. We heard a cat, didn't see a cat but found a dead kitten. We fucked out of there faster than ever. As risky as this sounds, my brother and I were entering private property that belonged to hunters. There were cows everywhere, and they started to look at us, and I got a very, very bad feeling. I looked at my brother and I said to him, "We better get out of here, right now." He believed me, and we went out of there. We both felt like a stampede was about to happen. Thankfully we were wrong. Fear can be a lifesaver sometimes. I was exploring an abandoned mental hospital on the outskirts of town. I had been before, but this time there was a new group of people who showed up and my group decided to show them around. This place was very haunted and we knew that, so we took them to the very back. It was a very large building, deep in the woods. We went in and the group was very rowdy. They had been drinking and were high as I could smell the weed on them. They started kicking doors, and telling the ghosts that they ain't shit and that nothing was gonna happen. We could tell they didn't believe in ghosts, and at this point I was still skeptical myself. Eventually we went to the 3rd floor, which was the most active. My girlfriend thought she saw the farthest door move at the end of this long hallway with at least 10 doors on each side. We told the other group and we all walked to the back. When we got there, 2 of the guys from the other group kicked the door open and started laughing. There was also an open door behind us. A few seconds after they kicked the door in front of us and the door behind us slammed shut. We all screamed and ran for our lives down the hallway and down the stairs. As we ran all the way to the exit, we heard another door slam behind us. Once we were outside, we heard a lot of loud banging and various different noises and we were very scared. We decided to leave, but then realized we were fucked because the other group had parked at the barbed wire fence in front of the hospital, letting the cops know we were there. And that was the only exit. The cops had their lights on and there was only one way in and out of the asylum. The owner of the car gave himself up and eventually so did we. We got off with a warning. As the other top comment says, the only thing to really be scared of is the cops. I've had to hide from cop cars by hiding in tall grass, and avoid cops by crawling into a crawl space in an abandoned hospital. After all these times I've only been handcuffed once and still got off with a warning as it was Halloween night and the cops were joking around with us. Rented some bikes in St. Louis. Just south of the Arch is a pretty cool set of spray-painted murals. Don't go there at night. We were followed by probably an undercover cop for a minute. Bunch of young adults smoking blunts, a couple hookers. We were there for too long. What is urban exploring? About 7 years ago, I found an abandoned cemetery on the south coast of NSW, Australia. Really creepy and overgrown off a side road. A few of the headstones were fire damaged. Apparently, this place dates back to the 1920s, 1930s, based on the dates on the headstones. Anyway, I decided to explore this in the very late afternoon, about 6:30 to 7 p.m. I was wandering around the place taking photos with a DSLR and the Eddie guy comes up to me to ask what I'm doing there. Yes, at the time I was a student and drove a really sketchy looking 2000 Toyota Camry, and it was very conspicuously parked on the side of the road. But this guy was riding a pushy on an 80 km/h road and reeked of alcohol and could barely talk. I think he was concerned about vandalism because some arsonists had damaged some of the headstones at some point. I checked later and I'm 99% sure I was on public land. I didn't argue though, I GTFO'd. 8 years ago I was at an abandoned grain silo at dusk. Went to go pee without a headlamp and on my way back I fell through a 4x4 hole that I had forgotten about that went to the basement floor. My heel caught the edge of the hole and the rest of my body went down, then out of instinct I caught myself on the other side of the hole with my hands. At this point my knee popped about 4 times and my heel was halfway up my back. I got a shot of adrenaline and pushed my body back out of the hole. My friend ran over to help me, freaking out. Immediately I jumped to my feet on that adrenaline high, not able to say anything, and then almost simultaneously puked and passed out but managed not to. The next 6 months my knee was swollen to the size of a grapefruit. My meniscus is pretty torn up and I should probably go get an X-ray at some point. I had spent an hour or so scoping out a large construction site in my local city. Other sites I had done in the city didn't have security guards, and while I suspected this one might, I still thought I would give it the old college try. I squeeze myself through the gate and take maybe 5 steps before I see a security guard about 30 yards away just now making his rounds. I don't think he saw me, but I waved to him, turned around, and promptly left the site. I was exploring an abandoned brick factory in Louisville, had been there tons of times in the past. I was there with one of my buddies and at 8:45 we heard "Hey over here" and a loud-ass truck driving in front of one of the buildings. We cut our flashlights fast as fuck, climbed a few ladders and sat on some bags of concrete for about 20 minutes before we got back up. I'm assuming it was patrol and they were early, but I was so scared my vision started blurring. In Montreal around March, so the snow started melting. I wanted to show some friends Fort Angrignon, but we knew the underground part was half filled with water to about our knees. When we got to the underground part we got ready to go in the water. We opened the first door. There was a piece on our left. Right after the door we heard and saw a figure and an old mattress, and the water started making sounds. We ran back to the ladder used to get in the building without putting our proper boots. There was still a lot of snow around. I grew up in a small town in Washington state that had some World War II bunkers up in the hills. There were some tunnels that would go incredibly deep into the ground. Down in one of the deeper ones me and my brother found evidence of satanic rituals and we ski-fucking daddled. As a teen I used to break into an old aluminium factory a lot. Led who was with me at the time up a staircase winding around pill-shaped vats with small flap lids. 4 flights up we start seeing feathers, then a dead bird, then a pile of dead birds, with no open ceiling where they could have flown in. We turn around and he stops me, says he saw some dust fall, and we notice the lid on the vat next to us is open. There were no noises aside from us, which was somehow comforting. Still never went back after that. One time, I was a missionary in Brazil. I walked up to a house where we had previously scheduled a meeting to talk about our message. The husband was sitting outside, very chill-like but obviously drunk, smoking a cigarette. We went up to him and said hello. He just looked up at us and said, "If you can cast out the demon that's in my house, I'll join your church." Just then, me and my companion heard a loud scream and crash from inside the house. That's when the "we better GTFO" hit. The husband then grabbed both our arms firmly and dragged us inside the house, and we saw his wife fighting their son, who had a knife and wanted to kill both of them. This dude was just sitting outside smoking while his wife was fighting for both their lives. SMH. I went to Greystone Asylum in New Jersey before it was demolished. Absolutely beautiful architecture, BTW. For anyone who hasn't seen it before, highly recommend you Google a picture. Anyway, after gaining access to the building, we found the lights were still on, weird considering the building had been abandoned for so long. We just looked around the area checking things out. The place reminds me of the Resident Evil 2 police station. We got to the top of the main building where the chapel is located, and everything is pristine except for the fact that the enormous cross behind the pulpit is upside down. Okay, a bit weird. But people have to have done that before. That's when we start seeing and hearing things. Hallways we had passed coming up are now dark. You can hear things scuttling about in the darkness. Obviously just mice or raccoons or something, we told ourselves. Then we decided to explore lower into the building. So to preface, there is a series of underground tunnels that were used to transport the more violent patients from one of the satellite buildings to the main building for doctors' appointments, etc. At the entrance to the underground transport tunnels, the air grows colder even though it's June. We're underground, of course it is. There are no lights leading down this barren concrete pathway, only the inky darkness in front of us that our flashlights can't even seem to penetrate. As the path begins to gently curve, we begin to see a glow of light ahead of us. As we approach, this is the first light we've seen down here yet, besides our flashlights. It's coming from a room set off from the transport corridor, maybe an office or storage area. We decide to see what's inside. The room is completely devoid of anything except a thick coating of dust on the bare concrete. In the middle of the room, the light we noticed was coming from an ordinary table lamp set on the floor. It wasn't until we noticed the lamp wasn't plugged into anything that we decided to get the hell out of there.